"Tie me up," the Apache woman told the rancher who bought her to free her. The lonely man didn't know. The ranch had been in his family for generations, and he had taken over after his parents had grown old and passed away. Samuel was a tall, broad-shouldered man, with hands worn by years of hard labor. He had a kind heart but a quiet sadness that no one had ever seen. The days were long, the work endless, and the nights stretched on in a deep, lonely silence. Though the land was beautiful, Samuel felt something missing in his life. A companionship, a friendship, someone to share the quiet moments with, even if it was just a simple conversation. He spent his mornings riding out to check on the cattle, making sure the fences were strong, and tending to the land. Afternoons were often filled with repairs, fixing broken tools, patching old fences, and cleaning the barns. At night, he would sit by the small fireplace in his wooden house, reading old books or writing letters he never sent. He never married, never had children, and though he had friends from the nearby town, they were few and visited only occasionally. The loneliness weighed on him, though he rarely admitted it to himself. It was during one of these quiet afternoons that news reached Samuel that a woman, an Apache woman, had been captured under circumstances he did not fully understand. She was not from the town but from far away, and people said she was strong, smart, and proud. She had been through hardship, and yet she had survived. Some called her brave, others whispered about her intelligence and her spirit that refused to be broken. When Samuel heard that she would be brought to the ranch, he felt a mixture of curiosity, concern, and unease. He did not know what to expect, and yet something in his heart stirred, a feeling he could not name, a hope that perhaps her presence would bring something different into his quiet life. When the day finally came, Samuel was waiting at the edge of the ranch, the wind carrying the scent of the earth and the soft sound of cattle in the distance. The woman was brought by a small group who had been tasked with delivering her safely. She stepped down from the horse carriage with a steady, confident gait. Her eyes were sharp and alert, scanning the land and the man who would now be her temporary keeper. She wore simple clothing, practical for travel, but there was a certain dignity in her posture and in the way she held herself. Samuel watched her carefully, unsure what to say, unsure how to act. He had never been faced with a situation like this before. The first moments were quiet, almost painfully so. The woman said very little, speaking only when necessary, her voice calm but firm. Samuel offered a polite greeting, explaining that she would be safe on the ranch and that she could rest. She nodded slightly but did not respond with warmth or friendliness. Instead, she studied him with a quiet curiosity. Samuel, in turn, felt a strange mixture of respect and nervousness. He knew he had to be careful, had to show her that he could be trusted, but he also did not want to seem weak or uncertain. Every word mattered, every glance carried meaning. Over the next few hours, Samuel showed her the small house, the rooms she could use, and the land she could walk on. He explained the routines of the ranch, where she could find water and where the food was kept. The woman listened, not with fear or complaint, but with attention. It was clear that she had been through difficult times, yet she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had learned to survive against odds that would have broken others. Samuel found himself fascinated, not by her appearance, but by the strength he could sense within her. He realized that she was not just another person to care for. She was someone extraordinary, someone whose life had been filled with challenges far greater than his own. Despite the initial tension, there were moments when a small smile would appear on her face, brief but genuine. Samuel noticed these little signs, and they made his heart feel lighter, though he did not fully understand why. The two of them spent the day in quiet activity, Samuel repairing fences and the woman observing, sometimes helping by handing him tools or fetching water. There was a rhythm to their actions, a silent understanding that grew between them. It was not yet trust, not yet friendship, but it was the first step toward it. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Samuel felt the first pangs of unease. He did not want to make a mistake, to misstep in a way that would upset the woman or make her feel unsafe. He wanted to help, wanted to show that he was not just a lonely man in a remote ranch, but someone capable of kindness and protection. Yet he also felt the weight of his own inexperience with people like her, strong, independent, and cautious. He had spent so many years alone that he was unsure how to communicate, how to show that he could be trusted. That evening, they sat by the fireplace. The woman had accepted a simple meal, and for a brief moment, they shared a quiet space together. The fire crackled, shadows dancing across the wooden walls. Samuel found himself talking about the ranch, about the land, about the cattle, as if telling stories might help him connect with her. She listened, sometimes asking a question, sometimes simply nodding. Each interaction was small, but it felt significant. For Samuel, it was the first time in many years that he felt truly seen, that someone's eyes reflected a curiosity and attention toward him that went beyond the ordinary. Night deepened, and the silence of the plains surrounded them. The stars were bright, scattered across the sky like tiny lamps lighting the darkness. The woman remained calm, composed, yet Samuel could sense her alertness. She had not yet spoken of her past, nor did she share her plans if she had any. It was clear to him that she had endured much, and yet she carried herself with dignity. There was strength in her quiet, a presence that demanded respect. Samuel realized that his own loneliness had blinded him to many things, and now, confronted with her, he felt both humbled and fascinated. Before turning in for the night, Samuel made sure the woman's room was ready, that she had everything she might need. She thanked him simply, with a nod, but there was a subtle acknowledgement in her eyes that spoke more than words could convey. Samuel felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. He did not fully understand what was coming next, nor did he know the depths of her strength or intelligence. But he felt that this encounter, this meeting of two very different lives, would change him in ways he could not yet imagine. He returned to his own room, lying awake as the wind moved softly across the plains. He thought about her, about the way she had observed him, about the quiet confidence she carried. He realized that for the first time in many years, he felt a sense of connection, a small spark of hope that perhaps life could offer more than the endless work and the solitude. He did not yet know her story, nor did he know what challenges lay ahead, but he sensed that her presence would bring lessons he had never learned, feelings he had never felt, and experiences that might finally break the monotony of his long, quiet life. Outside, the ranch lay bathed in moonlight, quiet and still. Inside, two lives had just begun to intersect, each aware of the other in ways that words could not fully capture. Samuel, the lonely rancher, had encountered a woman unlike any he had ever met, and she, the Apache woman, had stepped into a world that was foreign and yet full of possibility. The night stretched on, carrying with it the promise of change, the beginning of trust, and the subtle stirrings of a connection that neither could yet define. It was a night of beginnings, of quiet understanding, and of the first fragile steps toward a story that would be far larger and more complex than either of them could have imagined. Days passed slowly on the ranch, but with the woman's presence, Samuel felt the rhythm of life shifting. She moved with purpose and awareness, observing the land and the routines of the ranch. Though she said very little, every action was deliberate, and Samuel found himself watching her closely, trying to understand her thoughts and intentions. There was a quiet intelligence in the way she handled herself, a calmness that made Samuel both admire and respect her. He realized that this was not just a visitor. This was someone whose mind and spirit had been shaped by experience and hardship. The woman, for her part, observed Samuel just as carefully. She noticed his kindness, his diligence, and the subtle loneliness that lingered behind his eyes. She saw the way he treated the animals, the way he respected the land, and the way he tried to anticipate her needs before she even spoke. She understood that he was not accustomed to interacting with someone like her, someone who had lived a life of challenge and resilience. Yet she also sensed that beneath his quiet demeanor, there was a heart capable of empathy, a mind willing to learn, and a soul seeking connection. It gave her a measure of comfort, though she remained cautious. Each day they worked side by side, sometimes in silence, sometimes exchanging small words. Samuel would tend to the cattle, repairing fences or checking on the land, and she would assist when necessary or simply move among the barns and sheds, observing and learning. There was a subtle dance between them, an unspoken understanding that neither fully controlled the other. It was a test of character for both. For Samuel, a lesson in patience and trust. For the woman, an opportunity to assess whether he could be relied upon if the need arose. One afternoon, as the sun hung high and the wind carried the scent of wildflowers across the fields, the woman decided it was time to take a careful risk. She had observed Samuel long enough to understand the depths of his character, but she also knew that she needed a plan to regain her freedom. Not recklessly, not in haste, but in a way that ensured her safety and respected the trust that had slowly begun to form between them. She considered her options, weighing each action carefully. Her mind moved quickly, but her exterior remained calm. Later that evening, as they sat together in the quiet of the main house, she spoke, her voice steady but carrying a subtle weight of intention. "Tie me up," she said simply. The words were unexpected, and Samuel froze. His hands hovered over the rope he had used earlier in the day to secure the barn doors. He stared at her, unsure if he had heard correctly. The woman met his gaze calmly, her eyes unwavering, and repeated the words with the same clarity. "Tie me up." He wanted to follow her instructions, to show that he trusted her and that he was willing to help, but the fear of misstepping gnawed at him. He had spent so many years alone that he had forgotten how to navigate the complexities of human interaction, especially with someone as strong and mysterious as this woman. The woman remained patient, giving him the space to think. She understood his hesitation. She had anticipated it. Her plan required not only courage on her part but also a willingness from him to act without full understanding, a test of his character, trust, and empathy. By giving him such an unusual instruction, she was inviting him to make a choice, to step into a moment that demanded both attention and care. It was a subtle way to measure whether he could rise to the occasion, whether he could follow through with trust rather than fear. After several moments of silence, Samuel took a deep breath and decided to act. He approached her slowly, speaking softly to reassure both himself and her. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice carrying both caution and a hint of curiosity. She nodded. Her eyes conveyed calm certainty, and he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This was not a simple task. It required precision, attentiveness, and respect. Carefully, Samuel retrieved a soft but strong rope from a shelf, laying it out on the wooden floor. He instructed her gently to sit, explaining that he needed to ensure her comfort and safety. The woman obeyed without resistance, her movements graceful and deliberate. Samuel began to secure the rope, wrapping it around her wrists and ankles with care, making sure it was snug but not tight, secure but not painful. Each motion required focus, and each glance exchanged between them carried unspoken meaning. He realized that this act, strange and unusual as it seemed, was a moment of connection, an exercise in trust and understanding. As he worked, the woman remained still, observing his expressions and movements. She understood the inner struggle he faced, the fear of making a mistake, and the desire to do what was right. She had chosen her words carefully, knowing that only someone capable of empathy and patience could follow through without hesitation or harm. Samuel, despite his uncertainty, continued, guided by both instinct and the silent communication that passed between them. The rope became more than a tool. It was a symbol of trust, a bridge between two very different lives. Once he had finished, Samuel stepped back, studying the result. The woman sat calmly, her posture composed, her expression serene. She did not struggle or complain. Instead, she met his gaze with quiet acknowledgement. In that moment, Samuel felt a mixture of relief and astonishment. He had followed her instructions exactly, trusting her wisdom, and in doing so, he realized that he had grown in ways he had not anticipated. His mind was filled with questions, but his heart felt a strange sense of peace. The woman's plan was unfolding, but she remained cautious. She knew that freedom required patience, strategy, and careful observation. By giving him this command, she had created a situation where trust was tested, where actions spoke louder than words. Samuel's willingness to follow through, despite confusion and fear, demonstrated the depth of his character. It showed her that he was capable of empathy, that he could act responsibly, and that he was willing to engage with her on her terms. The evening stretched on, and the two sat together in quiet reflection. Samuel could not help but wonder about her past, about the challenges she had faced, and the strength she must have carried to survive. He thought about the lives she had touched, the dangers she had escaped, and the courage she had shown. He realized that he had much to learn from her, not only about trust, but also about resilience, determination, and the quiet strength of the human spirit. Meanwhile, the woman considered her next steps carefully. She knew that she needed to regain her freedom, but she also recognized the importance of maintaining the trust that had begun to form. Samuel had shown patience and care, and she respected him for it. Her plan required precision, timing, and the willingness of both parties to act with thoughtfulness. She could not rush, could not act impulsively. Every movement, every instruction, and every decision had to be deliberate. As night fell, Samuel remained vigilant, checking on her periodically while also reflecting on his own feelings. He realized that this encounter had stirred something within him, a sense of connection he had not experienced in years. The loneliness that had weighed on him so heavily began to feel less suffocating, replaced by curiosity and cautious hope. He did not yet understand the full story, nor did he know what the woman intended, but he sensed that their interaction was meaningful, that it had significance beyond the immediate moment. The woman, lying quietly in her room, thought about Samuel as well. She recognized his kindness, his hesitations, and the genuine concern he had shown. She knew that he was capable of understanding, capable of empathy, and capable of acting in ways that honored trust. Her plan depended on this realization, that he would follow through, that he would respond with thoughtfulness rather than fear. It was a delicate balance, one that required both courage and patience. Over the following days, a subtle bond began to form. Though their communication remained limited, each action, each glance, and each shared moment of silence carried meaning. Samuel learned to read her expressions, to anticipate her needs, and to act with care and respect. The woman, in turn, observed him closely, assessing his character and gauging his trustworthiness. Their connection was not yet friendship, but it was a beginning, a quiet understanding that would grow and deepen as events unfolded. Samuel also noticed changes within himself. He felt more attentive, more patient, and more aware of the subtleties of human interaction. He began to reflect on his own life, on the years he had spent alone, and on the lessons he had yet to learn. The woman's presence was a mirror, reflecting both his strengths and his weaknesses. He realized that life could be more than work and solitude. It could include connection, understanding, and the quiet joy of shared experience. The woman, meanwhile, continued to prepare herself mentally for the eventual execution of her plan. She knew that freedom would not come easily, that it required strategy, intelligence, and trust in the right moments. Samuel's willingness to follow her instructions had given her confidence, yet she remained cautious, aware that any misstep could jeopardize everything. She had survived difficult circumstances before, and she was determined to succeed this time as well. The days on the ranch became a mixture of routine and subtle tension. They worked together, shared meals, and spoke occasionally, yet beneath the surface, both were aware of the unspoken plan that lay ahead. Each moment was measured, each interaction carefully considered. Trust had been established, but the future remained uncertain. Samuel could sense that something significant was approaching, though he did not yet understand what it would entail. The woman, with her quiet strength and intelligence, knew that the moment of action would come soon, and she was prepared. By the end of the second week, Samuel and the woman had established a rhythm. There was a sense of respect and understanding, an awareness of each other's character and intentions. The rope, once a tool of confusion and fear, had become a symbol of trust and cooperation. The ranch, once a place of quiet solitude, now held the presence of two lives intertwined, each learning from the other, each growing in understanding and patience. The woman looked at Samuel one evening, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the floor. She knew that the moment was approaching, the moment when her careful planning would need to be put into action. Samuel, unaware of the specifics, felt a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. Yet both knew that change was near, and that their lives would never be the same after what was about to happen. The days on the ranch had grown longer in more ways than one. Samuel found himself thinking constantly about the Apache woman, about her strength, her quiet intelligence, and the strange, yet compelling trust that had begun to grow between them. Though she remained calm and measured, Samuel sensed that she was planning something important, something that he did not yet understand. The tension in the air was subtle but present, like the quiet before a storm, and it made him both anxious and curious. He knew that she was capable of extraordinary things, and he also knew that his actions in the coming days would matter more than he had ever realized. The woman spent her days moving with deliberate calm, observing every detail of the ranch. She watched the fences, the animals, the tools, and most importantly, she watched Samuel. She studied his habits, his reactions, and the small signs of character that revealed who he truly was. She had given him the unusual command to tie her, not as a game, but as a careful test, a test of trust, patience, and responsibility. He had passed, but the real challenge was only beginning. She needed him to act again in a moment where understanding and intuition would be more important than instruction. One afternoon, as the sun poured golden light across the fields, the woman spoke again. Her voice was calm, yet carried a subtle urgency. "Samuel," she said, "I need your help, and I need you to do exactly as I say." Samuel's heart quickened. He had learned to trust her judgment, but he did not know what she would ask of him. The memory of the rope and her previous instructions came to mind, and he wondered if this was another test or something more. He nodded carefully, saying, "Tell me what to do. I'll follow your instructions." She told him that there would be a moment where he would have to act carefully, to trust her guidance even if he did not understand the full picture. She emphasized the importance of patience, attention to detail, and calmness. Samuel listened intently, absorbing every word. Though he did not fully grasp the end goal, he sensed the seriousness and significance of her request. He felt both nervous and determined. This was no ordinary moment on the ranch. It was something deeper, something that tested not only his actions but his character. The evening came, bringing long shadows across the ranch and a chill in the air. Samuel had prepared carefully, setting out tools, checking the rope, and making sure the environment was safe for whatever was about to happen. The woman moved calmly, her eyes bright with focus and intention. She had planned every detail, anticipating potential challenges, and she trusted Samuel to follow through. The bond of trust that had grown over the past days was now being put to its ultimate test. Samuel felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him. He knew that any mistake could have consequences, yet he also knew that hesitation would betray the trust she had placed in him. "Samuel," she said softly, "now is the time. I need you to do exactly what I ask without doubt or delay." He nodded, swallowing hard. His hands trembled slightly, but he forced himself to remain steady. He had learned to follow her guidance before, and he reminded himself that careful attention and calmness were the keys. Every step had to be precise, every movement deliberate. He felt a strange combination of fear and exhilaration, fear of making a mistake, and exhilaration at being part of something larger than himself, something significant and meaningful. He followed her instructions, moving slowly and deliberately. She guided him with small gestures and clear, calm words, each step revealing more of her plan without exposing it fully. Samuel realized that he had become attuned to her presence, that he could almost anticipate her needs without being told. The rhythm of their interaction was delicate but precise, like a dance that required complete focus and trust. Each motion mattered, and each glance carried meaning. He could feel the tension building, the importance of the moment settling deep in his chest. As he worked, Samuel reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. Just days ago, he had been a lonely man, confined to the routines of the ranch and the silence of solitude. Now, he was engaged in an extraordinary moment with a woman whose courage and intelligence had already impressed him. He realized that this experience was teaching him lessons he had never learned before, lessons about trust, empathy, patience, and the power of human connection. He understood that this was not just about the rope or the plan. It was about understanding another person, about acting with respect and care even in the face of uncertainty. The woman remained composed throughout, her calm presence guiding Samuel's actions. She knew the exact moment to act, and she trusted him to respond correctly. She had spent years surviving difficult situations, learning to anticipate danger and making careful, deliberate choices. Her plan required precision and courage, and she had chosen Samuel because she sensed the goodness in him, the willingness to follow through even without complete understanding. She had calculated every risk, yet she also relied on his character and judgment. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the ranch, the moment arrived. Samuel executed the final steps of her plan with care, his hands steady despite the tension in his chest. He followed her guidance, adjusting the rope, making subtle movements, and ensuring her comfort and safety. Each action was critical, each decision mattered, and Samuel felt the weight of responsibility more acutely than ever before. He realized that trust was fragile, yet powerful, and that the bond they had formed depended on his ability to act with awareness, empathy, and care. The woman's plan began to unfold exactly as she had intended. Samuel, despite his inexperience and hesitation, acted with precision and patience, demonstrating that he had grown in understanding and character over the past days. She observed him closely, noting the careful attention in his movements, the steady focus in his eyes, and the genuine concern in his expressions. She knew that the success of her plan depended not only on her own actions, but also on his willingness to trust and act responsibly. As the final step approached, Samuel felt a mixture of awe and humility. He had been part of something extraordinary, something that required courage, intelligence, and trust. He realized that his own life, though quiet and lonely, had prepared him in unexpected ways for this moment. His patience, diligence, and quiet strength were being tested, and he was rising to the occasion. The woman's confidence in him had not been misplaced, and he felt a deep sense of pride and responsibility. The plan reached its critical point, and Samuel followed her instructions exactly, trusting her guidance completely. The woman remained calm, her eyes reflecting focus, determination, and gratitude. She knew that her freedom and safety depended on this delicate collaboration, and she had chosen Samuel because she sensed that he could rise to the occasion. His steady hands, careful attention, and thoughtful actions demonstrated not only skill but character. Finally, as the last movement was completed, there was a moment of stillness. Both Samuel and the woman paused, breathing in the silence that followed. The tension that had built over days and hours slowly eased, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and relief. Samuel realized that he had been part of something far larger than himself, something that required courage, trust, and empathy. He understood that the lessons he had learned would stay with him forever, shaping the man he was becoming. The woman gave a small, almost imperceptible smile, acknowledging his efforts without words. Samuel returned the gesture, understanding that this was more than gratitude. It was recognition of the bond that had formed between them. Though her plan was not yet complete, the critical moment had passed successfully, and both knew that their trust in one another had been tested and proven. The quiet connection between them was strengthened, and Samuel felt a deep sense of respect and admiration for her courage and intelligence. In the days that followed, the ranch seemed to hold a different energy. The tension had transformed into a subtle sense of anticipation, a quiet excitement that both Samuel and the woman felt. They continued their routines, tending to the animals, repairing fences, and preparing meals, but the knowledge of what had passed and what was yet to come lingered in the air. Each glance, each gesture, carried a deeper meaning. Samuel had learned to read her expressions, to anticipate her intentions, and to act with care and understanding. The woman, in turn, continued to observe him, recognizing his growth, his patience, and the depth of his character. Samuel reflected on the experience often, thinking about the lessons he had learned. He realized that trust was not given lightly, and that understanding another person required attention, patience, and empathy. He understood that courage was not only about physical strength, but also about the willingness to act responsibly, to follow through even when the outcome was uncertain. The woman had taught him more in a few days than he had learned in years of solitary life. The woman, meanwhile, continued to prepare for the eventual completion of her plan. She knew that freedom required timing, strategy, and careful coordination. Samuel had proven himself capable, and she trusted him fully, but she remained vigilant. Every movement, every word, and every gesture was part of a larger strategy. Her confidence in Samuel's character allowed her to proceed with caution, knowing that he would respond appropriately when the critical moment arrived. As the sun rose and set over the ranch, the days carried a sense of quiet purpose. Samuel and the woman moved in harmony, each aware of the other, each learning from the experiences they shared. Their connection deepened, not through words or expressions of affection, but through actions, trust, and mutual respect. They had become partners in a delicate plan, each understanding that the success of the endeavor depended on both courage and character. The night finally arrived when the woman knew that the critical phase of her plan would soon unfold. Samuel, unaware of the full scope, felt a mixture of anticipation, uncertainty, and determination. He had grown in confidence and understanding, and he knew that his actions would matter more than ever. The bond they had formed over days of observation, patience, and careful interaction had prepared them for this moment. Both knew that the choices they made now would shape not only the immediate outcome, but also the lessons and experiences they would carry forward. The night was quiet on the ranch, but the air was thick with anticipation. Samuel moved slowly, carefully, his senses alert to every sound, every movement. He had learned over the past days to watch, to listen, and to act with patience and understanding. Though he did not fully know what the Apache woman planned, he trusted her completely. That trust was now the foundation upon which the final steps of her plan would unfold. The woman moved with calm purpose, her eyes reflecting the wisdom of experience and the careful calculation of someone who had survived countless challenges. She had spent days observing Samuel, understanding his character, and now she knew that the moment had arrived. Her plan to regain freedom, to step beyond the restrictions of her current circumstance, required precision and courage. She had confidence in her abilities, and she had faith in Samuel's character. Together, they formed an unusual partnership, bound by trust, respect, and the silent understanding of necessity. She spoke softly, her voice steady but carrying urgency. "Samuel, I need you to follow my instructions exactly. Do not hesitate and do not question. Everything depends on what we do now." Samuel nodded, his heart beating faster, his hands steady despite the tension in his chest. He had learned that careful attention, patience, and empathy were more powerful than haste or force. He understood that the success of her plan relied as much on his trust as on her strategy. The two moved through the quiet ranch house, their steps measured and deliberate. The woman guided Samuel with subtle gestures, each one carefully planned to ensure clarity without revealing too much too soon. Samuel responded with careful precision, mindful of every instruction, aware that any mistake could disrupt the delicate balance of trust and safety. He realized that he was no longer simply a rancher tending to the land. He was part of a plan, part of a story larger than himself, and he felt the weight of responsibility more keenly than ever. Outside, the night was still, the moon casting silver light across the fields. The woman led Samuel to a secluded corner of the ranch, a place carefully chosen for privacy and safety. Here she paused, giving him a moment to steady himself. She looked at him directly, her eyes calm but intense. "Samuel, you have done well. Now everything we've prepared comes together. Trust me as you always have." Samuel nodded again, swallowing hard. He felt a mixture of fear, anticipation, and awe. He had been part of extraordinary moments before, but this felt like the culmination of everything he had experienced since her arrival. The woman carefully prepared the final steps. She had anticipated every possibility, calculated every risk, and now she was ready to act. Samuel watched, attentive and respectful as she moved with precision. He followed her instructions exactly, adjusting the rope, ensuring her safety, and responding to her subtle cues. The tension in the air was palpable, yet there was also a calmness, a rhythm born of trust and careful observation. Samuel realized that he had grown in ways he had never imagined. He had learned patience, courage, and the importance of understanding another person's needs without question. At last, the critical moment arrived. The woman executed the final steps of her plan with calm determination. She moved deliberately, freeing herself from constraints in a controlled, precise manner. Samuel observed closely, ready to respond if necessary, but her confidence and skill were clear. Every motion was deliberate and every choice carefully calculated. In that moment, he understood the depth of her strength, the resilience she carried, and the wisdom that had guided her actions. As she regained her freedom, the woman paused, looking at Samuel with a mixture of gratitude and acknowledgement. She did not need to speak. Her eyes conveyed everything. Samuel felt a swell of emotion, relief, admiration, and respect all at once. He realized that he had been part of something remarkable, that he had been trusted with responsibility, and that he had acted with integrity and care. The experience had transformed him, opening his heart and mind to lessons he had never anticipated. The two stood in silence for a moment, the night around them calm and still. Samuel felt a profound respect for the woman, and she, in turn, recognized his growth, patience, and character. The bond formed between them was not based on words or sentiment alone, but on shared experience, mutual trust, and understanding. It was a connection born of challenge, courage, and collaboration, and it left an indelible mark on both of them. The woman spoke finally, her voice soft but firm. "Samuel, you have shown me kindness, patience, and trust. You have acted with care and understanding when many others might not have. Remember these moments as I will. They are rare, but they define who we are." Samuel nodded, deeply moved by her words. He realized that this encounter was more than a lesson. It was a turning point, a memory that would shape his life forever. In the days that followed, life on the ranch returned to its quiet routine, but everything had changed. The woman prepared to leave, her freedom restored. Samuel assisted her, ensuring that she had everything she needed for the journey ahead. Though parting was bittersweet, there was a shared sense of accomplishment and understanding. Each had learned from the other, each had grown through the experience, and each carried the memory of trust, courage, and connection. Before leaving, the woman took a moment to look over the land one last time. She reflected on the days spent on the ranch, the moments of tension and trust, and the quiet bond formed with Samuel. She recognized that, though their paths were diverging, the lessons learned and the connection forged would remain. Samuel watched her, feeling a mixture of pride, admiration, and wistful sadness. He knew that her presence had changed him, opening his heart and mind to new perspectives and deeper understanding. As the woman mounted her horse and prepared to ride away, Samuel approached her one final time. He offered a simple farewell, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "Be safe," he said. "Thank you for trusting me and for teaching me more than I could have imagined." She nodded, a small smile touching her lips, and replied, "And thank you, Samuel. Your trust and patience will stay with me as long as I live." With that, she rode off into the night, her figure gradually disappearing into the moonlit horizon. Samuel stood on the ranch, watching her leave. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying with it the echoes of their shared experiences. He felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, a recognition that he had grown through the encounter, and a deep respect for the woman's courage and intelligence. The loneliness that had once weighed heavily on him now seemed lighter, replaced by the knowledge that connection, trust, and understanding were possible even in the most unexpected circumstances. In the weeks and months that followed, Samuel reflected often on the woman and the lessons she had imparted. He thought about her courage, her intelligence, and the careful planning that had guided her actions. He remembered the trust she had placed in him, and the responsibility he had embraced. The experience had taught him about patience, empathy, and the power of careful observation. He realized that life was richer and more meaningful when one approached others with respect, trust, and understanding. The ranch itself seemed to carry a new energy. Samuel moved through the daily routines with a renewed sense of purpose. He tended the land and cared for the animals, but he also carried the memory of the woman's visit, the lessons learned, and the quiet bond that had formed between them. Though she was gone, her presence lingered in the lessons she had taught and the growth she had inspired. Samuel also noticed subtle changes in himself. He was more patient, more attentive, and more aware of the complexities of human interaction. He had learned that courage was not only about facing physical challenges, but also about trusting others, acting responsibly, and navigating uncertainty with care. The encounter had transformed him, opening new perspectives and deepening his understanding of both himself and the world around him. Though the woman had left the ranch, the connection remained. Samuel often thought of her, imagining her journey and hoping for her safety and success. He knew that their paths might never cross again, yet he felt a lasting sense of gratitude and respect. The experience had shown him the importance of trust, patience, and empathy, lessons that would guide him in all future interactions, and that had forever changed the course of his life. The days grew longer, the seasons shifted, and the ranch continued to thrive under Samuel's care. Yet in the quiet moments, he would remember the woman who had entered his life, the trust she had placed in him, and the courage she had shown. Her presence had been brief, but the impact was enduring. Samuel understood now that life's most profound lessons often came through unexpected encounters, through challenges that required both strength and heart, and through moments where trust and empathy were tested. In the end, Samuel found that he was no longer the lonely man he had been before. The encounter with the Apache woman had opened his heart to connection, understanding, and the quiet joys of trust and respect. He carried the memory with him, a reminder that courage and kindness, when combined with patience and careful observation, could change lives in ways that were subtle but powerful. The ranch, the land, and the life he had built remained, but now they were infused with the lessons of the encounter and the quiet, enduring presence of trust, empathy, and shared experience. Though she was gone, the story of her visit and the trust they had built would stay with Samuel forever. He had been part of something extraordinary, something that went beyond the ordinary routines of ranch life. He had learned to act with care, to observe with attention, and to trust even when the outcome was uncertain. And in that, he had discovered a richness in life, a depth of character, and a sense of connection that would continue to guide him long after the woman had ridden into the horizon.